We haven't had a POV in Tarth, but we do have a POV from Tarth. And most of us can't help but have an extremely positive association due to it being Brienne's home, mixed in with that lack of detail. It says at least a few good things about Tarth, given it brought us a person with her extraordinary character, and she's not a random product of an environment that doesn't fit that. No, Tarth very much supports the outcome of Brienne's personality, even though she's an exception. Deeper digging reveals more. Tarth is a bit of a world apart. Not apart like, say, the Summer Islands is from Westeros, or even the Iron Isles, where so many things are very different. I mean, a place that's clearly similar in some ways to mainland Westeros. It doesn't have a different religion. It is quite steeped in the Seven. Nevertheless, like so many islands, it is different. It's not the biggest island in Westeros, but it's up there, so it's sort of a self-contained world. It doesn't rely as much on the outside world and doesn't traffic as much with the outside world. Using our prior examples, the Summer Isles and Ironborn are fairly insular cultures, but they are world travelers. They trade and roam all over, one sort of out of necessity and the other out of maybe curiosity and ambition. Tarth is not like that. I wouldn't call it a bubble, but people don't feel the need to leave, so it has more of that feel to it, more of that vibe, I think. Tarth produces neither explorers nor pirates, once again, compared to the Summer and Iron Isles. As to why, well, that's not something I can express quickly here in the intro, so we'll discuss it throughout the episode. It'll take more than a few sentences. But it starts with Tarth's natural beauty. It is called the Sapphire Isle, after all, and it is perhaps appropriate to call it a bit of an idyllic place. By Westerosi standards, of course, which means there's still plenty of violence and conflict and sort of things of that matter. But Tarth's natural geography and location in the Narrow Sea make it a point of interest for traffic, trade, and war with the free cities, meaning long-standing enemies like the Blackfires in recent time, and in ancient times, the Andals. When invaders come from the east, Tarth is liable to be compromised. They're right there in the front. It's closer to Tyrosh than King's Landing, Tarth is. It's as close to Lys as it is to Harrenhal. It's much closer to Volantis than it is to Casterly Rock or Winterfell or Highgarden. Kind of interesting, huh? It also has a connection to Sir Duncan the Tall. That's as big as he is. Also to House Targaryen and House Baratheon and House Durrandon. Tarth has a good bit of Arthurian influence and some Tolkien, and as often the case with George, the world building is logical and consistent and holds up to real world comparisons, things that we know on a scientific level. And we have all that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. It's another Sunday, and it's 3 o'clock Eastern, which is when we are live, except during the TV season, which is coming up soon. During the TV seasons, we are live at Mondays at 6, always Eastern time. So once again, off-season, 3 o'clock Sundays, in-season, 6 o'clock Mondays. Every video is available on YouTube and Spotify, and all of our podcasts are available in audio-only format wherever you can find a podcast. And if you listen to them on Patreon, well, they're ad-free. Big shout out to Nina. goodqueenally.tumblr.com with one L is where you can find her takes, but you can also find her takes in this episode and many other episodes. Her current post over on goodqueenally.tumblr.com is related to a bit of a what-if question. What would have happened if Tywin's plan of marrying Sansa to Tyrion and taking Winterfell through that marriage, how would that have gone? What are some possibilities or things that would have come up with that? If you have questions for us, hit us up at westeroshistory@gmail.com, and I'll hit you all with some episodes at the end of this one that relate. And we'll start with a trivia question, also, which I will reveal the answer at the end. Which Targaryen prince was killed on Tarth? Like I said, answer at the end. Let's now read the section headers for this episode. Setup, first mention, ancient history and geography, then founding, then the Sapphire Isle, then kings and Evenstars, then the Storm Kings, then the Andals, then Sir Galladon and Morn. Yes, he's Sir Galladon of Morn, but we're going to talk about both. Then Sir Galahad, the biggest inspiration for Sir Galladon. Then Morn itself. Under the Dragons. The Conquest, A Game of the Narrow Sea, Sir Duncan and the Targaryens, A Song of Ice and Fire in Tarth, and then Brienne, and then our outro. Plenty to talk about today, but I'll also hit you guys with a poll. For those of you watching live, or if you listen on Spotify, the poll will be available as well. Will Brienne inherit Evenfall Hall? Or will she join a Kingsguard or the like, or die? Something like that. We have several answers. You can say inherit, Kingsguard, die, or other. So 4 choices: inherit, Kingsguard, die, or other. Let's get to it with our first mention. Yeah. The first time we hear of Tarth, it's pretty obscure. It comes when Lord Commander Mormont is dealing with the problem of Jon Snow having just attacked Sir Alliser Thorne. But then Jon saves Mormont's life immediately after, and that, complicates things. So we have this quote. Sir Andrew?
Jon did not know the name. Sir Andrew Tarth, a good man. He's on his way from the Shadow Tower to assume the duties of Master-at-Arms. Sir Alliser Thorne left yestermorn for Eastwatch by the sea.
It's kind of funny how sometimes Google doesn't recognize some of these words from medieval times, like yestermorn. It's like, that's not a word. It's like, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Mormont sent Thorne to King's Landing to treat with the Lannisters about the Whites. He took the hand, right? Now, Andrew Tarth became Master-at-Arms in his place, as the quote said. Probably a long overdue change anyway. Thorne was bad at his job, let's be honest about that. I mean, we saw it firsthand. He wasn't good. Now, Davos also mentions the Tarths in the A Clash of Kings prologue as one of the houses he met with to try to win support for Stannis. Here's the first time the house itself is mentioned, however. Quote,
a roar went up from the crowd as a helmetless, red-bearded man with a griffin on his shield went down before a big knight in blue armor. His steel was a deep cobalt. Even the blunt morning star he wielded with such deadly effect, his mount barded in the quartered sun and moon heraldry of House Tarth.
Of course, that's Brienne, whom Catelyn and the reader, if it's your first time, does not yet know as a woman. It even says his. It kind of pulls you in with that belief, and frankly, in this setting, that is what you would expect. I mean, it's not weird to have guessed that's a man. But this is a knight of House Tarth, and that's also very important here. Smashing their way through the melee. The blue knight from House Tarth, that makes sense in retrospect. The Sapphire Isle, it's all very fitting. I'm wearing a Tarth shirt. It's blue with the quartered sun and moons. There you go. That's what she would have seen. Now, we find out, as I said, the same moment Catelyn does, though I doubt and hope few of us were horrified like she was. Like, horrified? Like, what? That's what Catelyn, that's her reaction. She's horrified. It's like, what? Now, neither is Brienne just a random rarity, though. As I suggested in the intro, her homeland absolutely supports the person that she came out to be. Not that it produces a lot of people like Brienne. Of course it does not. But what I would say is that if she was born in the Iron Isles, she'd probably be a kinder, more ethical Ironborn, but she wouldn't be Brienne of Tarth. She wouldn't be what she is now. That support, that goodness wouldn't have been present for her to grow up under. But let's go back way farther. Ancient history and geography. Though it has a lot of unique features, we don't know of any particularly unique flora or fauna on Tarth. Perhaps there are, and they just haven't been mentioned. There'd be little reason to. I mean, it's not that story relevant. Brienne might have an idle thought about that here and there, and maybe that's something coming, but for right now, we don't know. Now, a lot of that, if we can get a bit nerdy with it, depends on how long Tarth separated from the mainland. If we can assume the landmass on Taros, Planetos, whatever you want to call it, had a Pangea of its own like we had on Earth many hundreds of millions of years ago, then Tarth would have been attached to the mainland at some point. It depends on how long ago it separated. A place like Madagascar separated from Africa super long ago, and it is thus very different. Even though it's right next to Africa, it doesn't have poisonous snakes, for example. Africa, the mainland, has tons of poisonous snakes. Madagascar also has 900 species of orchids, and most of those aren't found on Africa. Those are just two examples. I could go on, but we don't need to. The point is, if Tarth separated, 100 million years ago, then you would expect the flora and fauna to be a lot different. Whereas if it was, just a few million years ago or 10 million years ago, something like that, well, it would still be different, but it would be a lot less so. And one of the reasons we ask this question isn't just for the nerdy real-life geography interest, but it's because we are curious about whether or not the children of the forest were present, and whether there's werewoods, let alone heart trees. Heart trees, I would guess no. There may have once been, but definitely now I don't think so, because as we'll see later, Tarth was a hotbed of Andal migration, and we know the Andals did not like the werewoods. So it's not a place that is likely to have survived. The werewoods there, if there were any, are not likely to have survived. And there are mountains there, which implies caves. So the children could have lived in those caves. But if those cave systems aren't connected to the ones on the mainland, then I don't know that they ever would have occupied them. There's not much evidence of children of the forest activity on a lot of other islands that we've seen. Like Bear Island? I don't know about that. The Sisters... The Iron Isles, yeah, it's just, it doesn't seem like there's much there to suggest their activity. So I'm going to guess no. And that's important too, because that really fits with the vibe of the place. It is an Andal place, but the best of Andalhood, the best of the Andal culture in a lot of ways. The goodness of it, not the parts that are all about invading and conquering and all that stuff. We're talking about the values that they purport to hold that most people don't actually hold. Knightly values, as we'll see. Tarth, as we'll gradually paint the picture, filling in what you didn't know or don't recall, has a lot more, like I said in the beginning, an idyllic or romantic vibe to it. Arthurian. It's very Arthurian, even though we're lacking some detail. What we do have very much seems steeped in that. The mysticism associated with Tarth is Andal mysticism, which is a shallower pool to be sure, but it's, again, we get nothing Children of the Foresty, old godsy about Tarth, but we have lots of things from the Seven, questing, knightly values, like I said, Arthurian stuff. But let's not forget, I said idyllic, I said romantic. This is Westeros, and even in Arthurian stories, of course, there are bad things. There's horrible tragedies, there's mistaken identities, there's curses, there's bloody deaths, there's all kinds of violence and conflict, and Knights of Summer die. Even Brienne points that out in one of the first scenes where she has dialogue. So this may have never been a place of the old gods. That's entirely possible, which would kind of fit with the like I keep using the word vibe for lack of a better word, because so much of this is we're reading between the lines on. We don't have direct information. So I think vibe is an appropriate term. It's a feeling we get about the place because we don't have direct information. It doesn't have stories of skin changers or green seers or things like that. At least if it does, we don't have them. But it does have magic swords and the perfect knight and the Seven engaging directly in mortal affairs. It's one of the largest islands in the Seven Kingdoms. I think it's third biggest. It's hard to tell because all we can do is really look at the maps and kind of, ballpark it, spitball it. Skago's certainly the biggest, right? That's pretty easy. Then I think the Arbor is second largest. And then I think it's probably Tarth. Great Wick might be the next biggest, but whatever. It's big. Estermont is its closest neighbor island-wise, other than the very small island that's part of Tarth that's next to it that we don't have the name of. Estermont is considerably smaller than Tarth. The southernmost tip of the Isle of Tarth aligns almost directly due east with Myr. And as I said in the intro, it's closer to Tyrosh than King's Landing. A lot closer by ship, even. In terms of just straight as the Craven? I tried to say crow and raven at the same time. As the crow flies, it's close. But to sail to King's Landing from Tarth, you have to go around Massey's Hook, where it's just a straight shot from Tarth to Tyrosh. Pretty interesting, especially when you think about things like the Blackfires and how that was their base, Tyrosh. Yes, important. And guess where the Gold Company landed? Well, several places, really, but one of them is Tarth. It's very close to Storm's End, closer than any of these other things we named. Very close to Storm's End. And it's about as close to Volantis as it is to the Eyrie. It's farther than Casterly Rock to Lys, or to Volantis. So that's pretty interesting, I think. Founding. It's a bit overstated to say the First Men were not a sailing culture, because the First Men, we mustn't forget, are not one culture. That's a catch-all phrase for all the unknown variety of cultures that migrated and sort of amalgamated into a new culture when they reached Westeros, more or less. It is fair enough to say mostly they weren't sailors. They mostly migrated by foot through the land bridge that's no longer there. But clearly, the islands, for the most part, around Westeros are populated, and this wasn't a thing that only happened when the Andals came. So yeah, there were people exploring the nearby islands at least, and then when you get to cultures like the Ironborn, they go a bit farther. Well, a lot farther. So why sail the seas when you have everything you need on land? This is an important question. That's why I think Tarth isn't a big exploring sailing culture, even though they're an island. They don't need to go elsewhere. They have what they need right there. The Ironborn, kind of poor culture to begin with. There's not a lot of natural resources there. Over time, it's gotten worse because, for one thing, they haven't invested in infrastructure very much. Two, they cut all the trees down. They've had big problems with that. That's going to cause all kinds of climate change and messing up the soil, and hey, they don't sow, so they don't care about that. No, they do sow. Their thralls do that work. So yeah, that's the First Men. Maybe the islands were some of the last things that got taken because of this lack of sailing, but it did happen. And some of these islands you can see from, like, I wouldn't be surprised if you could see Tarth from Storm's End, because it has mountains that they would be visible from a distance. If it was a flat island, maybe not. So this is where the Ironborn kind of come from, right? They obviously took it further and developed all the way into a maritime culture, but Tarth didn't. So I think it's really interesting. Now, there's other reasons for that, which we'll get to, but most island people, most island cultures, they are sailing people. Tarth is the exception, not the rule. Iron Islands are kind of normal. Not the specifics about the Iron Islands, but the fact they're sailors. That's the normal part. The Arbor, sailors. House Velaryon on Driftmark, sailors. The Sistermen, sailors. Pirates, really, but Skagos is an exception. Partly because it's hard to sail to Skagos and to leave Skagos because it's so mountainous that there aren't a lot of harbors. So it doesn't really lend itself to that as much. But again, that's an exception. Or a place like the Thousand Islands where there's like a cultural fear of what might emerge from the depths. And that's a whole other story. They definitely don't have worries about, deep ones at Tarth, as far as we know. So even the Bear Island, they have longships there. The Shield Islands, they're all sailors. This is an exception rather than a norm, and that makes Tarth, alongside a lot of other details, a bit unique. The Sapphire Isle. For who knows how long it's had this nickname? Probably a very long time. But why? Well, Brienne gives us the answer very straightforwardly while she's a captive of the Bloody Mummers. Quote,
"Why did you tell him Tarth was the Sapphire Isle?" Brienne whispered when Urswick was out of earshot. "He's like to think my father's rich in gemstones."
"You best pray he does."
"Is every word you say a lie, Kingslayer? Tarth is called the Sapphire Isle for the blue of its waters."
"Shout it a little louder, wench. I don't think Urswick heard you." So yeah, there are no sapphires occurring on Tarth. It's not just there aren't many. No, there aren't any other than ones that were imported. So Jaime was telling one of those lies that was, quote, not without honor, as Ned told Arya in the case of driving Nymeria away. Ironically, this is a contrast to what actual sapphires seem to represent frequently in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is whites in the Song of Ice and the others, right? So again, yet more just divergence from what we're used to with these symbols. And that's partly because, well, Tarth is different. It has its own views on things, and blue there, the blue of the waters is the implication, not the others. Almost anywhere else, and we see sapphires and blue stuff like that, we're going to think of the others. But on Tarth, no. We think of something good, something that's not, the ultimate evil or what have you. I mean, other examples of like Aemond, One Eye had a sapphire in his eye. That's not a positive association. Simeon Star Eyes, that is a positive association. He had 2 sapphires, so maybe that's the way. 2 is better than 1, right, Aemond? So that's pretty, I think that's pretty telling, the way the symbolism is different in the eyes of people from Tarth, or when associated with Tarth. Nina points out that Sapphire Isle is surely a homage to Ireland, which is called the Emerald Isle, which, ever since this I did not know, Nina points out that there was a poem called When Aaron First Rose from 1795, and that's where apparently it's first named the Emerald Isle, and that stuck. So, also, Ireland does not have emeralds. None. Just like Tarth has no sapphire. So it's the exact same metaphor in a sense there. And Ashay and I have been to Ireland. It's beautiful. It is very green. It is I see why it's called the Emerald Isle. But of course, it's also got a lot of other types of terrain. Not all of it is green. It just has a lot of green. It's got coasts, and you might not think that Ireland has mountains, but it does. They're not very tall, to be fair, but it has 209 mountains. That's a lot of mountains for a very small place, relatively speaking. Ireland, if it was a U.S. state, it would be the 47th largest. So out of 50, that's pretty small. But it probably has a wider variety of terrains than most U.S. states do. Now, the Iron Isles actually do have an abundance of iron, so that one actually is straightforward. But they're also a gray place. It's not a colorful place, partly because of all the trees getting cut down, but not just because of that. It's just kind of naturally more gray. And there's reasons for that too, and it's subtle and interesting and kind of satisfying. But building up to that, a character who is satisfying isn't the right word, Victarion, he has some thoughts, got to use that word loosely with him, that are fitting here. Quote,
Victarion did not like this sea, nor these endless cloudless skies, nor the blazing sun that beat down on their heads and baked the decks until the boards were hot enough to scorch bare feet. He did not like these storms, which seemed to come up out of nowhere. The seas around Pike were often stormy, but there, at least a man could smell them coming. These Southron storms were as treacherous as women. Even the water was the wrong color, a shimmering turquoise close to shore, and farther out a blue so deep that it was almost black. Victarion missed the gray-green waters of home, with their white caps and surges.
That just makes me laugh. Even the color of the water is wrong. But it's telling because, yes, different bodies of water around the world, real life, and in Planetos have different colors. Let's talk a little bit about why. Very nerdy stuff here. Now, that's not the Stormlands that Victarion's talking about. He's at the Isle of Cedars, way the hell over in Slaver's Bay, or near Slaver's Bay. But the point is the same. The Stormlands is like that. It has sudden storms that come out of nowhere that you don't see coming. That's the kind of storm that sank Robert Stannis and Renly's parents in sight of Storm's End. It was sudden, didn't see it coming, no one could smell it coming. And this blue that he's describing is not the same as Tarth, right? He said turquoise, not sapphire. Blue so deep it's almost black. That's probably similar. But the point here is that Victarion doesn't like blue seas. And he's a sailor. He doesn't see it very much. So why is the water around Tarth so blue and so gray-green on his side? Well, George is on top of the science, whether he did it intentionally or not. He did it right. Ocean waters on Earth go west to east because the planet rotates one way. It doesn't rotate both ways, so the waters go one direction, generally speaking. That's not, not all water flows that direction, but oceans in general, the currents move that way. Now, this can cause upwelling along some coasts. What is upwelling? That's when the surge of the water is enough that heavy enough, strong enough that the water beneath pushes up from underneath and pushes the warmer water back. And the water down deeper has more sediment in it. Thus, it's grayer and it gets rid of the blue. Why is water blue in the first place? It's not just like anything else you look at. Any color you see with your eyes is a reflection of what light comes back to you because the other colors are not reflected back. If you're looking at blue water, it's blue because the light comes at it and the water diffuses all the other colors except blue. Blue is the only color that it leaves. So that's why you see blue. It's not that it's blue, it's that it filters everything else out. So you can take that logic and apply it to different colored oceans. Okay, so I just explained why west to east. Well, that's why the west coast of Westeros is grayer and stormier and has bigger waves. Because of this scientific principle, this geological principle, this is how the oceans work. That's why the Caribbean has blue waters, or San Diego has big gray waves all the time, right? Like there's a lot of real world examples where you can just think about it and be like, oh yeah, that's true there and here. Sapphire waters are described in the real world. Not a lot of places, but plenty. I mean, there's a huge number of bodies of water in the world. One of them is Wakulla Springs, Florida, which I've been to. I mean, that's near where I spent a lot of my early years growing up. I lived in Tallahassee, and Wakulla Springs, Florida is not that far.
I've been there too.
Yeah, Shay's been there too. So Wakulla Springs, yeah, it's got sapphire described waters. Another one is the Samana Peninsula in the Dominican Republic. And of course, the Dominican Republic is in the Caribbean. So yeah, there you go. Water moving west-east, where the water west of the Caribbean is land. So it doesn't build up. It isn't moving all the way across the Pacific Ocean to smack into the west coast of California, right? That's a big difference. Now, where does the green come from? We talked about blue and gray. Why is it green? Well, that's simple. Algae. Algae is green most of the time. Now, there's other colors of algae, and when there's other colors of algae, the water can look different. There can be red algae. There can be yellow. I mean, it can be pretty much any color. That's pretty rare, but it does happen. We've got red seas in Planetos. We've got red seas on Earth. So that basically explains it, and that also tells you that the waters around Tarth are not super stormy. The wind can be because it's the Stormlands, but the tides aren't that bad on their own. Sure, the winds can mess with the tides. Those two things, do impact each other. But for the most part, it's a very different landscape for sailors. And it's neat that we have an experienced sailor, even though Victorians, kind of weird with it. It still tells us a lot. Now, as we pointed out earlier, sailing culture's very common on islands, and even though Tarth isn't as much of a sailing culture, they do sailing still. It's not like they don't do it at all. Brienne has skills at sailing. We saw that during her escape with Jaime and Sir Cleos. She was the one piloting the skiff, and Jaime takes note of the fact that she knows what she's doing. And then she jumps off the skiff and swims. There's another skill that you would see very common amongst islanders, especially an island that has lakes, lots of beautiful lakes. So there's lots of beautiful places to swim, and there's the beaches. It's an island, so there's beaches all around it. I mean, maybe not 100% of the way, but a lot. So it makes sense, right? She does all those things. And then she climbed. She swam to shore and then climbed up the mountain or the hill and pushed that boulder down. That's another skill that you learn living on an island that has mountains, or anywhere that has mountains, really. Island part isn't so relevant there, but it's all very attached. We see her do three things, demonstrate three different skills, all of which you would expect a lot of people from Tarth to have. So it's really solid there. That the world building here really connects very well. Brienne really is a person from Tarth. I mean, it really clicks when you lay all this out. And yeah, the poorer people, the common folk, they wouldn't be sailors as much, but some of them would. They would be hired as sailors. And now I'm talking about different types of sailing, right? There's not all the same. Brienne handled that skiff quite well, but I don't suspect she knows how to sail a warship or a large trading vessel, right? Those are different sailings. That's like saying I know how to drive a car. So that means you can drive an 18-wheeler? Does that mean you can drive an excavator? No, of course not. Same thing goes for ships. Lots of rich people have boats, but they're usually yachts or sailboats. You don't see rich people with great skills at sailing aircraft carriers or whatever. Well, maybe a few of them. But yeah, it's or a commercial vessel, like some huge trade cargo ship. You don't see rich people learning how to pilot those. So the same kind of concept goes here for a lower tech environment. There's probably lots of smaller boats, but since Tarth is more insular. They don't have a lot of people building ships and traveling all over the world. It has waterfalls, lakes, and soaring mountains. Quote, again, the mountains are tall. That's what soaring means, which means bigger than Ireland. We made that comparison in the Emerald Isle, and there are a lot of comparisons here, but Tarth is much bigger than Ireland, and its mountains are much taller. I think that Tarth compares in a lot of ways to Madagascar here. Madagascar is a similar distance off the coast of Africa as Tarth is off the coast of Westeros. They're both on the eastern side of the continent, and they both have mountains, and they're similar size, I think. The waterfalls on Tarth mostly face east, probably because of the way the mountains would have formed. It's a geological thing that I can't explain very well. But again, this is all these places that Brienne probably would have climbed as a young person, especially as a noble-born person who would have been taught a broad skill set, especially those that relate to her homeland, sailing, swimming, climbing. Now, no sapphires, as we've said, but they do have famously excellent marble, perhaps the best marble in all of Westeros. Let's explain. And that's certainly a luxury resource, even though it's not as luxury as sapphires or emeralds or rubies. And why do we say this? Because the king of the Vale, long time ago, Roland the First Aaron, sent his builders all over Westeros to find the best stone, because he did not think the marble that was in the Vale was good enough for the Eyrie. And the consensus, apparently, was that the marble from Tarth was the best. So that is what the area is built from. Marble from Tarth. I guess Tarth probably has some other useful exports. Timber, maybe. They certainly haven't chopped all their trees down, so they have at least a intuitive understanding of sustainability, because as we saw at the Iron Islands, they don't. They have cut all their trees down. So whatever the inspiration is, Ireland, Madagascar, George's own imagination, some other things that I probably haven't named, Tarth is beautiful. That's a very important bottom line, and that has a big impact on the people who live there and the characters who come from there. In the real world, people don't actually move a lot, but when they do, well, they usually don't move away from places like this to some place that's not beautiful. Like, if you get used to that, it's kind of hard to leave. I think a lot of y'all who live in a really beautiful place would be like nodding your head like, yeah, I can't imagine moving. Whereas you live in kind of a crappy place, it's a lot easier to imagine moving if you can afford it or what have you. So this is yet another reason why the culture would be more insular, and people would be proud of their culture because it's a great place to live. It's beautiful, and they'd be proud of that. You know, like, we love to live here. You know, it's a great place to be. It's a good thing. And yeah, why would you leave? The Westeros is full of war and smelly cities and things like that, and politics and all that. Why would you leave? I mean, well, you might leave because you're Brienne of Tarth and you want to prove yourself as a knight and go do knightly things and all that. That said, Brienne wants to go home. It's not something she thinks about a lot, but she does think that if I didn't have this oath, I would go home. But she did take that oath, and, well, there may not be a living character in Westeros who takes oaths more seriously than Brienne of Tarth. Now, real quick, the Straits of Tarth, a little more about the sailing aspect of here. The Stormlands is not the most inviting place to be a sailor. It is the Stormlands, and Shipbreaker Bay is right there. So it isn't, so that is also another reason, perhaps, why there's less of a sailing culture here, because it's more dangerous. But there is a haven. There's a built-in solution. The western side of Tarth, because it's so close to the mainland, the storms don't have time to build up. The waves don't have a lot of momentum, which is why the waters are blue. Well, that's a safe haven for ships. If you park your ship on the western side of Tarth, it's somewhat hidden from the storms, because the storms are generally going to emanate in the narrow sea. And then Tarth's big mountains and forests are a bit of a block to that. And storms don't generally pop up from the other side. So it's a safe place to keep ships, which is useful for House Tarth and for the other petty kingdoms that existed in times long gone, but also for the Storm Kings. The Storm Kings would often park their ships there, which meant they needed to have a trusting relationship with House Tarth, because otherwise that's a good way to have someone steal your ships. Sam Jensen 30 sends a super chat, boss sticker. Thanks for that, Sam. We appreciate it. We're having fun talking about Tarth. Let's keep it going. Kings and Evenstars. Evenfall Hall and other seats on Tarth, which we don't really have the names for other than Morn, which is a ruin, was built in the earliest days. Evenfall Hall was. We don't know when Morn was built, but definitely later because it appears to be of Andal origin. More on that later, though. Let's focus on the Evenstars and Evenfall Hall. Evenfall Hall is westward and central in Tarth, but inland, so it's not itself like a port or anything like that. And there's one straightforward aspect to this name, Evenstar. It's an inspirational piece, not something from in-world. The Evenstar derives from Lord of the Rings. Arwen, her full name is Arwen Endomiel, which translates to Arwen Horseface. No, sorry, Evenstar. In the Peter Jackson films, the Evenstar is a necklace worn by Arwen. She gives it to Aragorn when he departs with the Fellowship. In the book, she gives him her elf stone, which serves a similar purpose. It's a similar gesture, but that elf stone isn't called the Evenstar. She's the Evenstar. In either case, it's like an engagement ring, though. And it foretells that she's going to give up her immortality by committing to him. Arwen in Sindarin, which is, one of the Elvish languages, translates to noble maiden. That's appropriate. And in Welsh, which Tolkien derived a lot of Elvish from, it means greatly blessed. There you go. That's cool, Arwen. So in Arwen herself, the character is certainly a noble maiden, and her devotion to Aragorn is the stuff of legend. She gave up her immortality to be with him, not unlike Luthien did with Beren in the First Age. Arwen and Aragorn being the Third Age of Middle-earth. And in Westeros, it's the same sort of story as Elenai did for Duran. Like, Duran was a human, but he wasn't from Tarth. This is a Durrandon story in his case, but that's the Storm Kings, who the Tarths are very connected to, both by marriage and other things. Obviously as a vassal of the Storm Kings. But Elenai gave up her immortality for Duran. So the place George used that, or borrowed that concept from real-world mythology, is placed right here in the Stormlands, right next door to Tarth. And it's worth considering these details because we might find other inspirational details from along these lines, and we'd be ready for it. Like, oh, hey, look, there's another little Arthurian thing. Or, hey, look, there's another Tolkien thing. We're kind of ready for it because we already know it's there. Like, Lord Selwyn it's pretty Tolkien-ish, right? That name, not the spelling, I mean, there's W-Y-N is not a suffix you see in Tolkien, but Selwyn sounds kind of like Arwen or Luthien or Gilwyn or Hirwin or Hurin or Turin or Urwin or all these other Tolkien names. A deeper cut, pun intended, Aragorn wields Anduril, a sword once called Narsil, which was an ancient sword forged in the First Age by dwarven smiths, apparently. At the end of the Second Age, the famous Elendil wielded it against Sauron. Now, Sauron slayed Elendil, and when Elendil fell, dying, he landed on his sword, Narsil, and it snapped in half. Elendil was a big man. He was 7'11". So, yeah, that's big. Now, Isildur picked up the blade, the hilt, and used the broken part. It was still sharp, as Sean Bean says in the movie, and he cuts the one ring from Sauron's hand with that broken sword. Now, Narsil is often referred to as the sword that was broken, or the sword reforged, because it's, Aragorn uses Anduril, which is the reforged version of it. Narsil means red and white flame, which are the chief heavenly lights as enemies of darkness. That's straight from Tolkien, right? It's the sun and the moon. Yeah, that's the imagery. That's the sigil of House Tarth, sun and moon. It's almost red and white, too. You got a white moon and a orangey red sun. It's close. So there you go. Now, the Evenstar also seems to fit, and it sounds positive, right? This isn't like the scythes of House Harlaw, or the vultures of Blackmont, right? This is a positive celestial. It gives you good vibes, not dark, not evil, not questionable. So, but where did this name come from? Like this non-sinister sounding name that even kind of sounds like justice, right? Which is the most important thing that a lord can bring. Generally speaking, that's what people expect. That's the most valuable service an authority figure can really have, arguably. Certainly one of the most important. Maybe this is what helped the Evenstars win out in the long run. We know that there were multiple kingdoms on Tarth. Now there's just the one, minus the Golden Company invaders, but they haven't formed their own kingdom. So I think that if people associate justice, even-handed rule with the Evenstars, it's right there in the name, that's good marketing, I guess, then people would want to follow them as compared to someone else who's ruling more like a typical Westerosi lord would. So this is a family tradition that's very noble, something that you want to uphold. It's like a tradition like we do not sow. It's very much like they're taught to be violent and to look down on people who aren't them. This isn't here. Tarth doesn't have that as far as we can tell. They aren't taught that. It's not built into the culture. It's not built into the house. Now, if we look back on some things we've said, that the First Men weren't big on sailing, that storms are a problem for any invader, save perhaps those just across the Straits of Tarth, where the storms are less likely to be a problem. Well, the people of Tarth over time would have a sense of where the harbors, where you can land, where on the island are the landing spots for ships of any size. And maybe if there aren't too many of them, well, you guard those particular spots and say, okay, well, we've got the harbors are locked down. Maybe not, though. Maybe they can't do that. If so, if they could do that, they'd have a reasonable amount of security. They could keep their Tarth bubble insular the way they want and not worry too much about foreign invaders. That may have been a time like that, I think, in the First Men era. But once the Andals came, which we're working our way towards, that would have changed. So their ancient enemies would have been other foes from within the Narrow Sea region. The people who lived on Massey's Hook, and the people who lived on Estermont, the people who lived around Storm's End, including the Durandons, but not just them. The people of Griffin's Roost, for example, things like that. Those would have been maybe their ancient enemies and ancient allies, depending on which century you're in and the other circumstances. So all kings of Tarth were Evenstars, the ones that ruled from Evenfall Hall, that is, because again, there were some petty kings before that. But of course, so they didn't start off ruling all of Tarth. That was a thing that happened over time. These kingdoms, like they did everywhere else, kind of gradually coalesced into smaller ones. You had 100 kingdoms, then you had 50, then 40, then all the way down. So there were lesser kings that have been long forgotten in the Sapphire Isle. Now, speaking of that nickname, star sapphires are a thing, right? And certainly a concept George has used. The star sapphires are specifically what Simeon Star Eyes used. And the Sapphire Isle and the name Evenstar, that's what I'm keying in on. Because again, the others, we already talked about that. That's a different connection to Blue Eyes here. And the Sapphire connection here is also different. It doesn't imply the same thing. So maybe this is what they're after. Maybe this connection is to the term star, Evenstar, which is again celestial like the sun and the moon. The last king of Evenfall Hall was Edwin Tarth. And he married Duran the Fair. Or sorry, he married, yes, King Edwin married Duran the Fair. No, his daughter married Duran the Fair. And that ended the Kingdom of Tarth as an independent body for good and all. They never became independent again, minus perhaps a few times when they rebelled and were temporarily independent, but it never held. But Evenstar continued, and that's unusual. Like, where else in Westeros does the lord of a particular house that isn't a great house have recurring title like this? There's a few other examples. The Lord Reaper of Pike is a thing, But Pike is, the Greyjoys are a great house, so I don't know. It's a fun and interesting little unique quirk, semi-unique anyway. Shout out to Carl Karsnark, regular listener and fan. It's their name day. All right. Happy name day, Carl. The Storm Kings. Yeah, Doran the Fair, the one who married, who married the daughter of Edwin Tarth, that is. Now, Doran the Fair implies a good-looking guy, but maybe it was an ironic nickname, right? It could be a joke like Brienne the Beauty, yeah, right? Yeah, that could be like that. Now, this Doran and his Tarth wife had a son, and that son married an unknown wife. And so the issue of that marriage was Eric the Sailmaker Durandon. Probably Eric the Third, but whatever. So this is probably a direct connection to his Tarth ancestry. You get a line of Storm Kings, and then all of a sudden, within a few generations of marrying into Tarth, they've got a guy called the Sailmaker who did a lot of sailing. And he got that name for his island campaigns. He's the Storm King that really made a point of making sure the islands were really a part of the Stormlands. He's the one who added Estermont. He's the one that added a lot of the lesser isles that we don't have names. To claim them, there would have been people, probably. Otherwise, they would have been claimed before, maybe by the people on the other islands. Either way, he got them all. And, it's kind of interesting that House Durandon, even though they've been extinct for quite a while, we have like 33 Durandon names. There's that many figures that have at least some detail on them. Most of them are kings, of course, and most of them are named Duran. But not all of them. But most of them are relevant to Tarth in some way or other, because again, the connection between Storm's End and Tarth is big and important because of the naval connection, because of the just distance connection. They're close by. And Tarth just has such a positive association. The Storm Kings would want that in their corner. The good people of Tarth, the upstanding nobility of Evenfall Hall and the other houses there. That's just a good thing to have on your side. Then we have Durwald the First, the Fat. Here's another one here's an example of one of those Durandons who absolutely is relevant to the history of House Tarth. Quote,
during the long years when Durwald I, the Fat, ruled in Storm's End, the Massies broke away. Tarth thrice revolted, and even upon Cape Wrath a challenge arose from a woods witch known only as the Green Queen, who held the Rainwood against Storm's End for the best part of a generation. For a time, it was said Durwald's rule extended no farther than a man could urinate off the walls of Storm's End. Can I just say it was hard not to laugh at the Green Queen because of the show The Curse with
Yes.
Nathan Fielder and Emma Stone, in which she is the Green Queen.
In this case, it's Emma Storm, not Emma Stone.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
So it says Tarth thrice revolted. It doesn't mean they were revolted 3 times. Like, ugh, that's gross for the 3rd time. No, they rebelled. And normally you would think, well, if they rebelled 3 times, things were really bad, and or the Storm King was really soft, which it kind of sounds like this is the case here. Because it may be the same guy rebelling 3 times. Normally you wouldn't get a 3rd chance, maybe not even a 2nd. You get executed or your power stripped away to the point where you're unable to rebel again, at least not anytime soon. So possibilities here are one that we got separate Tarths rebelling, or maybe one who rebelled 3 times. Something in between is possible. And the fact that the Storm King can't just march his armies to Tarth is certainly an advantage for the Tarths. And if they have the ability to keep the Baratheon or the Durandon ships away, or maybe they captured some of them, well, that would make their rebellion go a little smoother. Now, of course, it didn't hold, but it sounds like Durwald just wasn't a very good king, and a lot of things broke down under his reign. And he maybe just, we've seen it before, where a king puts down a rebellion, but he doesn't really have the authority to execute the ringleaders because the lords are just too powerful. It would cause bigger problems to execute them than to let them live, because their family members would immediately turn around and be like, you killed my father. And come for them again. It would start the violence all over again. Now, that's an okay solution if you are confident you can beat them. They won't come after you again if they're too weak. But clearly that's not the case here. They kept rebelling. So this guy kind of reminds me of a Tytos Lannister, a guy that just had constant problems with his vassals because he was just weak. Now, a king or three later saw a bit of a change. Quote,
his usurper... Oh, sorry. I promise you I was distracted by Xerxes down here. The tide turned again when Morden II named his baseborn half-brother, Ronard, as his castellan. A fearsome warrior, Ronard became the ruler of the Stormlands in all but name, and took King Morden's sister to wife. Within 5 years, he had claimed the kingship as well. It was Morden's own queen who placed Morden's crown on Ronard's head. If the songs be true, she shared his bed as well. Morden himself, deemed harmless, was confined to a cell in the tower.
Given their recent 3 rebellions, Tarth might have been in conflict with this King Ronard, but they might not have tested him because it sounds like he was not a guy you wanted to test. He was no Durwald. So here's how events played out from there. Quote again.
His usurper ruled for nigh unto 30 years as Ronard the Bastard. Ronard the Bastard, I want to say. No. Ronard the Bastard, smashing rebel bannermen and petty kings alike in battle after battle. Never a man to confine himself to a single woman, he claimed a daughter from every foe who bent the knee. By the time he died, he had supposedly fathered 99 sons. Most were bastard-born, though Ronard had 23 wives, the songs say, and did not share in their father's inheritance, but had to make their own way in the world. For this reason, thousands of years later, many and more of the small folk of the Stormlands, even the meanest and humblest amongst them, still boast of royal blood. It's a regular Garth Greenhand.
Yes, you're right. I wrote that in the notes later. You may not have seen it, but we just had the same conclusion. A little bit of Robert Baratheon there, too. And Genghis Khan, if we're going real world, because something like 1 out of every 500 people in Mongolia can trace their ancestry to him, which is like, that's crazy, right? But there you go. So this Ronard guy was a real influence on history. He did a lot of things. And yeah, it's entirely possible that the Tarths were one of these foes that bent the knee to him and he took a daughter, but it's possible they didn't. The Tarths were done rebelling given they had done so in prior generations and may not have had the strength to do it again. So they may have been on Ronard's side, in which case they wouldn't have had to do this. Either way, it seems like a little bit more separation for House Tarth than the rest of the Stormlands. Most of this was probably happening on the mainland. Most of these lords that were giving up daughters to Ronard were mainlanders that mix with each other a lot more. So this royal blood of House Durrandon that was spreading around through Ronard, Tarth might not have gotten some. Not a big deal. And of course, they marry into the Durrandons already, as we saw. But anyway, it's more of a cultural separation than some sort of actual difference created by bloodlines. These aren't magical bloodlines, so that shouldn't matter too much. At least we don't think they're magical bloodlines, but we do think magical bloodlines exist in this world. So Ronard is unlikely to have spent long stretches of time on the islands because, well, he's so busy putting down rebellions and doing all this other stuff. There's just more to do on the mainland. And if he's constantly at war, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to spend a lot of time on the islands when his mainland foes could take advantage of that. Well, while he's gone, well, let's make a move. The Andals. Here's how it began for the Stormlands. Quote,
Eric VII Durrandon was king in the Stormlands when the Andal longships first began to cross the narrow sea. History remembers him as Eric the Unready, for he took little note of these invaders, famously declaring that he had no interest in, quote, the quarrels of strangers in a land far away.
Now, this is sort of painting him as a bit of a failure, someone that should have done something. But what could he have done? It wasn't like he could stop the Andals. I mean, right? No one was going to stop them. No, even if all the kings of Westeros had united, they probably wouldn't have won. So it could have just been an excuse. He's like, yeah, this isn't my responsibility. I'm pointing out how this isn't mine. Like, he's washing his hands of it. He wanted to make sure everybody knew that. He had problems of his own, surely. And we even know some specifics. He had a pirate king of Massey's Hook called Justin Milkeye that he had to deal with. And he also had King Oliver Ironwood to his south causing problems. So even if he wanted to send help to the Vale, which is pretty far away, and again, this is an era where the Vale is an independent kingdom, they may not have any reason to get help from the Stormlands or vice versa. So that is where they first started, right? The Andals first started coming to the Vale. So, yeah, sending help wouldn't have been a typical thing anyway. By the time this guy, Eric VII, passed, they still hadn't moved beyond the Vale in any significant numbers. So that also goes to show that, yeah, like, we can't blame... This guy's getting some blame probably for things that really aren't his fault. Regardless, the name Eric the Unready is almost certainly a nod to Ethelred the Unready, who was king of the Saxons until he lost it to Svein Forkbeard, who, yes, that's a Viking king. Now, Svein died very quickly after winning, and so Ethelred got it back. But then Svein's son, Canute the Great, took it back from him in turn. So, yeah, back and forth, English throne, blah, blah, blah. That Ethelred the Unready also is a little unfair to call him the Unready. So I think George was not only capturing the nickname, but the actual same implication of the name, that it's kind of an overstatement. Next up, we have Carlton II the Conqueror Durrandon. Now, this guy, definitely more of a Ronard than a Durwald the Fat or a Eric the Unready. He was on the throne when things progressed to a point that started to matter for the Stormlands. Quote,
King Carlton II Durrandon was the first to face the Andals in battle. After 4 generations of war, that monarch, who styled himself Carlton the Conqueror, finally completed the reconquest of Massey's Hook, taking Stonedance after a year's siege and slaying the last king of House Massey, Joshua, called Soft Spear. I want Conqueror to be spelled with a Q at the beginning. Carlton the Conqueror.
Massey's Hook had been independent, we see there, or Pirate King ruled, for at least 3 generations. So this Soft Spear guy looks like he was not up to the task. Soft Spear isn't exactly a name that implies martial prowess, does it?
Or bedroom prowess.
Yeah, he didn't father many heirs.
That's a little bit of a floppy fish situation to me.
Yes, you're right. And this is a reminder that history doesn't always move in one direction. This is a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing for the Andals. They had moved in a lot, but then this Carlton the Conqueror guy had a lot of success pushing them back. But historically speaking, that was only temporary. Carlton III was next, and he warred his entire reign. He wasn't necessarily as mighty as his father, Carlton II, but he didn't lose anything. He kept it going. Then Monfred V was Carlton III's son. He was on the throne when the tide did start to turn. Since the Andals were mostly coming by ship, mostly long ships, the Isles were particularly vulnerable and made sense as first targets from Assos. Quote,
Though the Storm Kings won 6 major battles, the greatest of these being the Battle of Bronzegate, where Monfred V Durrandon defeated the Holy Brotherhood of the Andals, an alliance of 7 petty kings and warlords, at the cost of his own life. The longships kept coming. It was said that for every Andal who fell in battle, 5 more came wading ashore. Tarth was the first of the Stormlands to be overwhelmed. Estermont soon followed.
This is notable, as we pointed out before, for a lot of reasons. One, it speaks to why the place is so Andalized and why there's so little trace of, or any trace of First Men stuff or First Men worship or heart trees or anything like that. Hotbed of Andal activity, not just Andal activity, but Andal migrations. People who weren't used to Westeros yet. People who had their own beliefs and were very devout in the Seven and kind of thought that everything should fall under that purview. So Tarth may have had less and less to do with these battles and mainland problems because they were wholly Andalized by early on and would not have been loyal to the Storm King or these other things, these other lords, because they're now culturally separate. That's a big deal. They were overwhelmed. First, it says the first place to fall, and then Estermont. And that's how it is working out with the Golden Company too, when they're coming across from Essos. So after that, Tarth was probably a big problem for the Stormlands because it's just this hub of Andal migration. They can come across, have a safe landing, and then it's just a short boat ride to get the rest of the way to the mainland. And what are they going to do? Guard every inch of coast of the Stormlands? No, of course not. That's impossible. Like, Tarth couldn't do that themselves when the Andals were coming, and now that the Andals rule Tarth, well, the mainland faces the same problem. We've had a bunch of quotes about this era, and it's nice that the World of Ice and Fire has so much to say. Here's one final one about what happened in the long run. Quote.
In the end, the two sides simply came together. King Maldon IV took an Andal maiden as his wife, as did his son, Durin XIV, Durin Half-Blood. Andal war chiefs became lords and petty kings, wed the daughters of stormlords and gave them their own daughters in return, did fealty for their lands, and swore their swords to the Storm Kings. Led by King Ormond III and his queen, the Stormlanders put aside their old gods and took up the gods of the Andals, the faith of the Seven. As the centuries passed, the two races of men became as one, and the children of the forest, all but forgotten, vanished entirely from the Rainwood and the Stormlands.
Maybe not entirely. Those caves have some interesting things as them, as we see in the Arianne Winds of Winter chapter, but that's a bit of a digression. Because again, Tarth, very Andalized, probably didn't follow this same pattern. Look, we see gradually the Stormlanders put aside their old gods and took up the gods of the Andals. That had already happened on Tarth by the time it was happening elsewhere. So Tarth was the first place this happened. Outside of the Vale, I suppose, and was the source of so much more of that further development and migration. And yeah, so if the old gods and everything had been wiped out from their purview, from their island, well, yeah, it continued here on the mainland, but it happened first on Tarth. Now, let's move on here. Let's take a little break. We certainly do rely on y'all's support. It's another year here that we're getting into, 2026. It promises to be a great year for the fandom. We've got 2 TV shows coming. That always brings extra activity and fun, and lots more to talk about, in addition to our book content. So we're looking forward to that. We've got a lot of book content this year coming as well, and we'd love for you to take part in it. We have polls that decide what episodes we're going to make. We have bonus episodes. All that's available on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/History of Westeros. We have a variety of different levels you can sign up for with a variety of different benefits. Basic level is $5 a month. You get all our bonus episodes and the voting rights. Very simple, one and done. Every once in a while, log in, do your thing. We also have something very exciting here. Night of the Seven Kingdoms season is, of course, the first of the 2 TV shows coming up. And Ashea has been busy making a cool tour shirt. Here it is. Night of the Seven Kingdoms, thick as a castle wall tour. It's got the great logo, and it's got all the different spots that are relevant to Duncan's journey over his life. We've got Flea Bottom, Ashford Meadow, the Prince's Pass, Vaith, Planky Town, Old Town, etc., ending in Summerhall. Yeah. So these are available at historyofwesteros.threadless.com. Check it out. Get your own. Sir Galadon and Morn. Yeah, his name is Sir Galadon of Morn, but I put it that way because we need to talk about Morn as well as Sir Galadon, because what is Morn? He's not Sir Galadon of Tarth, though, of course, he's from Tarth because Morn is on the island of Tarth. Now, here's a primer from The World of Ice and Fire. Quote,
many of the folk of Tarth, highborn and low alike, claim descent from a legendary hero, Sir Galadon of Morn, who was said to wield a sword called the Just Maid, given to him by the Seven themselves. Given the role that the Just Maid plays in Sir Galadon's tale, Maester Hubert, in his Kin of the Stag, has suggested that Galadon of Morn was no rude warrior of the Age of Heroes turned into a knight by singers 1,000 years later, but an actual historic figure of more recent times. Hubert also notes that Morn was a royal seat of petty kings on the eastern coast of Tarth until the Storm Kings made them submit, but that its ruins indicate that the site was made by Andals, not First Men.
Yeah, it's possible Morn was carved out as a petty kingdom during the Andal migration, taking that portion of the island away from Evenfall Hall, and eventually that spread to the rest of the kingdom. And then in time, Morn ceased to be a power because the Andals had seized Evenfall Hall, and there was no more reason for it to be separate. And the Andal rulers of Evenfall Hall would recapture the whole of the island for themselves. So yeah, this Galadon is not in the mold of Serwyn of the Mirror Shield and so many other heroes who are legendary figures from pre-Andal times who have been retrofitted to the histories to make them fit with the Seven, to make them more familiar to the Seven. They want to hang on to those ancient legends, the value of those old traditions, but they want to Andalize them. That didn't seem to happen here. The Sir Galadon of Morn seems to be an actual Andal legend, not a modified First Men story. And that's because, as it says here in the quote, the details are all very Andal in their origin. Even the site of Morn itself is Andal architecture. And the name Galadon is very Andal, and the fact that the Just Maid and the maiden herself is in the story. All the story elements come from Andal culture. Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, that just doesn't fit. He lived thousands. The Andals weren't even. Heck, some of the stories say Serwyn of the Mirror Shield is in the Kingsguard, which is only a 300-year-old institution, and Serwyn is thousands of years old. So some of this stuff is very blatant. None of it is in the case of Sir Galadon of Morn. Everything aligns with Andal culture. Nothing seems to have been changed in retrospect. So that's kind of neat. It's a different version of that. The maiden, as we've said here twice already, is central to Sir Galadon's story. She falls for him. And obviously that's one of the seven. One of the seven falling for a human, for a mortal. That's something out of Greek mythology, or other mythologies too, but Greece is one we've been focused on quite a bit lately. So the maiden, if the story was stolen and just so well made into an Andal story that we don't notice, maybe the maiden was some other feminine guiding figure that was taken over by the maiden when the story was rewritten. So this isn't something rewritten or invented by George, of course. It's been done many times by political regimes, religious orders, or what have you. Sticking with ancient Greece, for example, the Macedonians, they set out to establish themselves as the rightful rulers of Egypt after they conquered it. One of their moves was to add a god named Macedon to the ancient pantheon, while claiming he had always been there. Y'all didn't know that? Y'all ancient Egyptians, you didn't know one of your gods was called Macedon? Well, good thing we're here to tell you otherwise. You guys have been worshiping wrong all this time. It's really quite a thing. Now, it's not as big of an invention as it sounds like, because Macedon was already an existing legendary figure. He wasn't something they just made up. They just changed the details about this god or figure. This is religious syncretism in play, which meaning merging of religious beliefs into one. Kind of a combination. So in this case, it was elements of Greek and Egyptian beliefs merged. The fuller but still brief-ish version of this begins with the Greeks, or whoever, mashing Osiris and Dionysus into one entity. Because obviously Dionysus is a Greek god, Osiris is an Egyptian god. So they did this by making... Osiris had 2 warrior sons, known for their bravery and skill. Anubis, who was a dog-headed god, and Macedon, who was a wolf-headed god. So this wasn't an insertion of a new god in a place of nothing. This was just swapping gods out. Take out a god, put another one in. Because Macedon originally had been Wepwawet, the wolf god of Lycopolis. So they switched the wolf god to Macedon. So still wolf-headed. No, in essence, they kind of just changed the name. They could write it off as just a name change. Yeah, it's the same god. It's a wolf-headed god. We just, it's just a different name. We should have been calling him this all along. So this isn't the same as when the priests of the Ironborn or the 7 worshippers on the Iron Isles tried to make the drowned god an 8th god of the 7. It didn't work. But that's a ham-fisted attempt, where this is a little smoother, a little more subtle, a little more nuanced. And it's also kind of cool because there's this Wepwawet, who was the wolf god, a son of Anubis, or son of Osiris, brother of Anubis, was the wolf god of Lycopolis. Lycopolis is a very straightforward meaning you can break down by the roots there. Lyco means wolf. Polis means city. City of wolves. Is that what it means? Yes, it is the city of wolves in Greek. Wolf mummies have been found there. Woo, that's creepy. And this is something that was thought to be made up by the historian Diodorus Siculus, Diodorus of Sicily. But like a lot of things Diodorus wrote that people thought, nah, that can't be real. It actually was real. Like, oh, actually, there are wolf mummies. Okay, he was right about that. Give him some credit. Now, later traditions have Macedon as the son of the werewolf Lycaon instead of the son of Osiris, because, yeah, these things get changed for political reasons or just cultural reasons, or who knows why. But that's kind of neat. This Macedon's the son of a werewolf. Yeah. Now, getting back to Westeros here, all or most religious syncretism is a form of cultural syncretism, because religion and culture are inseparable. So that's what we have in the case of Serwyn. That's cultural syncretism. They're trying to make Serwyn a knight. They're trying to make him a Kingsguard knight, right? So whatever stories were told about Serwyn 301 years ago, he wasn't in the Kingsguard, right? Now, this Sir Galadon of Morn, another piece of influence he has is people get named after him. Like Galadon's, Brienne's brother, who died young, was named Galadon. Now, what about Morn? Where did this come from? An Andal warlord named Morn, maybe? Or something like that. He carved out a piece of Tarth, whatever. Maybe he was Sir Galadon, or maybe Sir Galadon's brother, because it's not Lord Galadon. It's not King Galadon. So, yeah. So maybe that's the thing. Maybe he's related to the founders of Morn. That would explain why he's not a king, or doesn't have the name of a firstborn. Carl Karsnark adds, "Behold, the just made was just made." Nice. I love wordplay, y'all. And here is a little section on the just made. It was given, as the quote told us, a sword, a powerful sword so mighty that no common sword could check her, no shield could block her. And this sword was given to Sir Galadon by the maiden, who fell in love with him because of his purity, his perfect knightness, which is what he's called, the perfect knight. It's not my version. That's not my term for him. No, that is the in-world thing that Brienne says. He was the perfect knight. Now, he only draws the Just Made 3 times in his whole life because it's too fair. It's too unfair. It's not a contest. It's unchivalrous to fight with a weapon that no one can possibly fight back against. It's too powerful. It's dishonorable to fight with that sword. There's other, especially Arthurian, tropes about swords. You can only use it at a certain time, only certain conditions, or that maybe it's cursed, like the Sword of Balin. Who wields that sword is going to kill the person that they love the most. That's an Arthurian legend. And this whole thing sounds Arthurian, right? Like, it's not chivalrous to fight with a weapon that's just too powerful. So, Brienne, anybody? Brienne wielding Oathkeeper. What did we say about back in when we were talking about the influence of Narsil and Anduril, the Lord of the Rings sword, the Anduril being the reforged version. Brienne is carrying around a reforged magical sword too, right? She's carrying around Oathkeeper, which is a reforged version of ice. Well, half of it or so. So that's pretty cool. Also, kind of like the Just Made, Brienne doesn't just wield Oathkeeper all the time. She kept it hidden until she felt like it was time that they were about to have a fight. Now, to be fair, partly she kept it hidden because anyone who sees that sword is going to be like, whoa, look at that thing. It's covered in rubies. It's like, that is a fancy-ass sword. You can't just... It's going to catch attention. Also, the Lannister imagery and all that. So that's a problem, too. She doesn't want to get noticed for that. So there's more reasons to hide it, but ultimately it still has a similar vibe to it as the Just Made. You don't use it very often. This is a sword for special occasions. And she really did kick ass with it. And then Randall Tarley was like, it was a sword. That's why she was so effective against those outlaws. Nah, it was both. The sword helped, but Brienne was amazing. So, and keep this in mind, like if she had been attacked suddenly, if she'd been ambushed, she wouldn't have had time to draw Oathkeeper. It's packed up in her saddlebag. She had to tell Podrick, hey, go get it for me. Unroll it from the blanket. And here, Nimbledick, you can have my sword. In the meantime. And you even have another parallel here. The Just Made fell in love with Sir Galadon and gave him the sword. Jaime gave Brienne the sword. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say Jaime's in love with Brienne, but there's some love there. There's definitely respect, right? Jaime absolutely respects Brienne's devotion, even if he mocks her for it. Deep down, it's what he always wanted to be. It's what he thought he would be when he was 14, 15. She is what he thought he'd be. And some of that is seeing that mirror of himself. It's disappointing. And that's why he mocks her, because she's what he wanted to be. And he's mad about that. But over time, he starts to realize that, and he starts mocking her less and less, and does things like this that show respect, that show honor, giving her Oathkeeper. Yes, it gets her in trouble, but that's not his fault. He didn't see that coming. He's not the maiden, but he has only slept with Cersei. And the maiden protects young women. That's one of her roles, as said by the Seven. That's the doctrine of the faith of the Seven. The maiden protects young women. Jaime is arming and empowering Brienne to be as safe as she can on this dangerous quest. And what is her quest? To save 2 young women, Arya and Sansa. Too bad Brienne was caught by the stranger, Catelyn, in the meantime. Yeah. But maybe that'll have a happy ending. Not too happy, though. Sir Galahad. There's a major influence. You've probably heard of Sir Galahad of the Knight of the Round Table, but you may have forgotten some of the specifics. Let's get to it. Sir Galadon of Morn was called the Perfect Knight. Sir Galahad was called the Perfect Knight. And the names are similar. Galahad, Galadon, yeah, that's real similar. Much of what makes him perfect, Galahad, in this case, isn't skill, though he is extremely skillful. It's his purity. It's his chastity. He never even holds a woman's hand. But as well, he lives a life free of other sins. Brienne also hasn't even really held a man's hand, right? So there's a little of that. Now, this is more of a comparison to Sir Galadon, but again, Sir Galadon is a huge influence on Brienne, and we see some of these same kind of rare, unusual personal qualities. And Brienne would have been hearing these tales from a very early age. Continuing with Galahad. He was the bastard son of Lancelot and Elaine. Elaine was the daughter of the Fisher King, and Elaine used magic to make herself look like Guinevere. That's why Lancelot slept with her. When Lancelot found out about the deception, he got real mad and went to go kill her. But he forgave her because she's like, wait, we had a son together. And he's like, oh, we have a son together. Okay. Okay, I won't kill you. Now, the Fisher King received a prophecy that his son is designated by God to be the one that finds the Holy Grail. Not his son, this son, and this son of Lancelot and Elaine. And that is what happens. Galahad is the one who finds the Holy Grail, and it's because he's pure enough. Only the purest knight will find the Holy Grail. That's Galahad. Lancelot is reunited with his bastard son Galahad when Galahad turns 15. Lancelot knights him after they have a practice duel, and Galahad wins. Lancelot never, ever lost a fair fight before or after. So this is extremely noteworthy, and it's a reason to knight him so young, like a Jaime. Now, Galahad passes 2 tests after being brought to Camelot to join the Round Table. Let's not forget, by the way, the Kingsguard, their table isn't round, but the room is. So there's a little bit of that vibe there, too. Now, the first is a chair of these 2 trials, the 2 tests that Galahad passes. The first is a chair at the Round Table. No one ever sits at it because it's enchanted and only can be sat upon by the person who will succeed in the Grail quest. Many knights have sat there and it killed them because they're not the knight who's going to find the Grail. Galahad just sat down, no prob. He lived. That must be it. Then he pulls the Sword of Balin, the same sword I mentioned earlier, the knight with 2 swords. Balin was one of the greatest, most powerful knights of the Round Table, or knights of that era. I don't remember if he was a Round Table or not. He had a twin brother, Balin and Balin, and Balin killed Balin because his sword was cursed. And so his sword was then put in a stone, very similar to Excalibur, right? It's obviously the same kind of story. And Galahad pulled that sword from the stone. So then he goes off searching for the Grail. So he passes these 2 tests that no one else did. Then he performs miracles, he saves damsels in distress, teams up with Percival and Bors to find the Sword of King David, because, yeah, he needed 2 swords as well. He has the Sword of Balin, and he has the Sword of King David. The Sword of King David was originally the sword of Goliath. King David kills, well, before he was king, but David kills Goliath, takes his sword, and that's the Sword of King David. So that's quite a connection. They got the Knights of the Round Table making this connection of a blade that has existed since, pre-Christian times. And since Galahad was a bastard, maybe Sir Galladon was as well. Again, we were wondering why he's of Morn and not, a lord or anything like that. It could imply his birth status wasn't so grand. Someone who rose up, which that's a good story too. Maybe arguably even better story. Because of Morn isn't a house name. It's not Sir Galladon Morn. It's like Brienne of Tarth, although in her case she is of House Tarth, so maybe it's confusing. But she's the only exception. She's the only one called of Tarth. Right? Everybody else it's Sir Andrew Tarth. It's not Sir Andrew of Tarth. So it's a little confusing, and it just happens to be a little funny that the one exception is Brienne of Tarth and we're thinking of this Galladon of Morn. So Galahad sacrifices a lot to complete the quest. And there's a lot of symbolism here in terms of, yes, this was a change from the Knights of the Round Table, their focus. Once Galahad came around, their focus was the Grail. And it became a focus of this is piety and purity, heavenly devotion rather than earthly devotion. You serve God on earth or you're serving God later. It's different versions of that. And Brienne herself is a fairly excellent example of all this. Yes, Sir Galladon, in turn, represents Brienne. Sir Galladon was a good example to follow. They're both perfect. Brienne is, as we've said, the closest thing we have to a perfect knight in terms of how she behaves and how she keeps her oaths and what she just thinks and does. We're in her head. We know it's sincere. And maybe Sir Galladon, it really was like that too. We know Sir Galahad was from Arthurian legends. And if Sir Galladon was really like that, then this is a very legit source of inspiration for her and other people from Tarth. And it might not be exaggerated or not too much. I mean, the part about the just maid probably is. But he may have really been a just, pure kind of guy. Even if it was probably exaggerated. A little more about Morn. It's a defunct kingdom on the eastern side of Tarth, i.e. the coast facing the Narrow Sea and beyond, the more dangerous side. The coast hit harder by storms, the side more vulnerable to invasions, like this. In an earlier quote that Ashea read, we're told that a certain Maester Hubert argued that Morn was a minor Andal kingdom, carved out of Tarth, taken from the Evenstar, and thus taken from the Storm Kings, who Tarth was a vassal to. And then over time, they got to hold that because so many more Andals came. Morn may have even been a success story that encouraged further incursions, further migrations. More and more, something accelerated the rate of Andals coming, partly because there's just more places for them to come and get jobs and live in Andal kingdoms, but also because it was working. It was like, hey, so many people who came from here, from Andalos, are moving there and having great success. I want to join in. In the early days of the migrations, well, they weren't sure if it was going to work. Not everyone went. Only the boldest and bravest and most devout. But as success continued, more and more people did it. So you might have noticed as well here that when we're talking about islands, you can't exactly sail ships to the Eyrie, right? The Andals came to the Vale, but they had to switch to, land campaigns. But you can sail to Tarth, you can sail to Estermont, you can sail to Griffin's Roost, because it's right there on the shore. Those are all targets that the Golden Company has recently seized at the end of, or near the end of A Dance with Dragons. Not to suggest the Andal invaders were as competent or as disciplined or as united as the Golden Company. No, certainly not. But overall, they were certainly more numerous. There's more than 10,000 Andal migrants, and then, the Golden Company has 10,000. But the point is that Tarth is a big island with a small to modest-sized population. So it's hard for it to have the manpower to defend all its coasts. Even if they knew these guys were coming, which they probably didn't. Now, there's also the invasion of Meermen on the east coast of Tarth, which resulted in the Myrish bloodbath, which we'll get to in chronological order. I suspect this was near the region of Morn, though. I suspect the Myrish pirates and exiles who seized the eastern coast of Tarth, I bet this was near Morn, if not the exact area of Morn. They may have repurposed some of those ruins for their base of operations, even. Point being, there are multiple examples of successful foreign invasions on the east coast of Tarth. Not only is Sir Galadon's story very knightly all the way through, as we said, his name of Morn, given all we just said, is an Andal name, right? The ruins are Andal architecture. Morn is an Andal name, apparently. All that points to Andal. Maybe the Morns married into Evenfall Hall as an appropriate ending, a non-violent ending to their family, kind of becoming subsumed into what became a temporary royal family or became a new vassal of the Storm Kings, a new and more powerful vassal. Now, even Storm's End has signs of Andal architecture, but not the original foundation. So it's always got to remember that these things get added to, changed, rebuilt, problems happen, and you got to fix things. Same thing is true at Winterfell. Let's go to Under the Dragons. We're getting very close to our current timeline, and let's see what's going on here. We'll start with a quote.
The kingdom of the storm shrank, king by king, battle by battle, year by year. The fall was halted briefly when a fierce warrior prince, Argilac, called the Arrogant, donned the stag's crown, but even a man as mighty as he could only stay the tide, not turn it back. Last of the Storm Kings, last of the Durrandon, Argilac did just that for a time.
So this is a big leap forward in time, right before or during the conquest, when Storm's End was very Andalized too. So Tarth, I suspect, was right there with Argilac. Tarth's knights were probably on the field. The Lord of the Evenstar himself of the time might have been on the field too. If so, they surely took heavy losses because it was a very bloody battle, and it's hard to imagine anyone not taking heavy losses there. But they might have sat out because a lot of houses didn't want to face the dragons. But most of the houses did face the dragons at least once, so they didn't look like cowards, I guess. The North was an exception. Very few houses stood up to the dragons twice. Whether Tarth learned the lesson without having to learn the lesson or had to have some dragons go down to Meraxes is currently an unknown. But I'm guessing they fought and took heavy losses because that's, generally speaking, I'm going to guess that the Tarths did the more noble, honorable thing. Not always, of course, but without other information, that's what I'm going to tend to... That's where my brain's going to go. For the actual conquest after it, Orys Baratheon, of course, subsumed the Durandons and made them Baratheons. Their bloodlines all go through him as an apex. And when Orys was captured in 4 AC by Lord Will, the Widow Lover, that was not good. These are the guys who were imprisoned for 3 years and then had their sword hands cut off when a ransom was finally arranged. Now, most of them were killed before that, but if there were highborn knights or the Lord of Tarth himself might have been there, well, that would not have been a pleasant experience. At some point, probably after this, but maybe before, Queen Rhaenys arranged a triple marriage because Lord of Tarth and his lady wife had triplets. And it gives us a bit of an indication of what level of status House Tarth had after the conquest, and it gives us a bit of an idea of what status they have now in terms of primacy amongst the other houses. So these 3 marriages were to Corbray, Harlaw, and Hightower.
You know, I have a question. We don't really see a lot of other triplets.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's an element that they were even higher status for being triplets? Like they were more...
maybe
appealing. It was like good stock. I don't know.
It could be. Yeah, that might be. That might sound fertile. It might in the medieval, proto-medieval mind that may imply fertility or bode well for more children. Yeah, I could see them making a simple connection like that. Nice and spread out too. You got Harlaw in the Iron Islands, Hightower very far to the southwest in the Reach, and Corbray up in the Vale. So, interesting way to bring these houses together. It was generally pretty effective strategy by Rhaenys and Visenya to create a lot of cross-kingdom marriages. Under Aenys, obviously the second king, the Evenstar had a second son who married Larissa Velaryon. That's a very high-status marriage, too. And this is a second son, not the first son. And they had a daughter who in turn married Lord Estermont, who was an elderly man. And this happened in 55 AC. So there was probably no issue from that branch. So there's no cool Velaryon Tarth branch out there. But it kind of also sounds like this second son of the Evenstar kind of sold his daughter. Because why else do you marry your daughter to a really elderly man? That's just kind of weird, unless there's something in it for you. We see the elderly Lord Estermont marry... is it Silva? Spotted Silva? Yeah. So it's kind of a history repeating itself kind of thing. George playing around with that. Of course, Spotted Silva was one of the people caught alongside Arianne doing her play with Myrcella. So
kinda
the
like
old Estermont,
old turtle, kind of trope.
George himself is an old turtle, right?
Yeah.
A game of the Narrow Sea. The Narrow Sea contains a lot of different powers, obviously outside of Westeros and in Westeros. In ancient times, it would be both, and those would be, the Isles of Blackwater Bay, the Sisters, Estermont, and then the Free Cities. Bravos, Pentos, Myr, Lys, Tyrosh, mostly, and also Volantis. Lorath, Qohor, and Norvas, probably not so much, but maybe a little. And there's often fighting over the stepstones. That's a thing that just happens from time to time, right? They're not a big player in any of this, but they're right there in it, like geographically speaking. So they get caught up in it from time to time. They're not necessarily a big producer of ships nor a major trade center. They still get caught up in these things. They do make some ships. They do some trading happens there, A particularly notable example is one we mentioned briefly earlier that we've now arrived at in the chronology. King Jaehaerys I, the old king, the conciliator. There was, later in his reign, there was the Myrish bloodbath. It happened in the year 91, and by the year 92, it was a civil war that led to one faction being expelled and exiled. They still had a lot of strength, though. They fled Tyrosh with their army and ships and landed on Tarth. Again, southeast coast, basically, and carved out a spot. So this is, like I said, probably around morn. And it's a little bit like a microcosm of the Andals coming there. They forced their way there. They were kind of fleeing the Valyrians, the original Andals. This is, well, they're not fleeing the Valyrians, but they are fleeing a city founded by Valyria that was once ruled by Valyria. And so this losing faction was doing their thing, and Lord Cameron Tarth, the Evenstar, couldn't deal with them himself. He lacked the strength to do it alone. So the Iron Throne joined in. They sent powerful people to help. The Sea Snake, who was kind of a younger man then, but was already very strong, very notable. He was sent with his fleet. The Valyrian fleet showed up, and they transferred ships from the mainland across the Straits of Tarth. So the royal armies and other levies were safely transported from the mainland to Tarth with the protection of the Sea Snake's ships. But more importantly, Master of Laws and Prince of Dragonstone, Aemon Targaryen, rider of Caraxes, went as well. Now, the reason he went was because he learned his daughter Rhaenys, the future queen who never was pregnant, as it turns out, with Laena. Of course, Rhaenys married to the Sea Snakes. There's a lot of connection here. So he, satisfied that he's got an heir on the way who turned out to be passed over, as we know. Prince Aemon goes with his dragon. He meets with the Evenstar. He flies to a war camp up in the mountains. Cameron Tarth sets up his camp in the mountains, sort of in central Tarth there, to as a staging area to launch their invasion of the southeastern portion of the island to take it back, right? And the Mirmen, though, were not just sitting there. They sent out scouts to try to figure out what the Evenstar was doing, and they probably learned that the royals were involved, and so they were concerned and wanted to see what they were up against. Two of their scouts either got local help and or got lucky, because they found the camp and not only discovered the location of the royal army and the Tarth army, but they found the command tent and a vantage point to look down on it. Two scouts did this. One of them pulls out a crossbow and decides, well, he's going to go for it because it's close enough. They're close enough. That's why I said they got kind of lucky here. They were able to find their way to this close to the command tent and take a shot at Lord Tarth. Prince Aemon was standing right there, and he's the one who got hit. We're told that the scout was aiming for the Evenstar, but he struck the prince in the throat, killing him. Now, Aemon's next brother, Balon the Brave, responded viciously. He brought Vhagar and burned all the Myrrhus ships at anchor. Now, this tells you immediately what's going to happen next. He cut off their method of escape. Now, while he's doing that because he doesn't want any of them to escape. And they didn't. It may have been an entire massacre. Every Mirman may have been killed. Balon didn't use Vhagar for the killing of the soldiers. He took Dark Sister and went on the ground with everybody else and killed a lot of people. They didn't bury the bodies. They left them on the beaches. All the Mirish dead were left there rotting, which almost certainly means for years and years after they were finding bones, maybe even the occasional piece of loot. A Lord Tarth was at the Great Council of 101, and it may have been Bryndamere Tarth, because this is the next Lord Tarth we know of. This Lord Bryndamere, the Evenstar, did side with the Greens, but Otto was worried that they would side with Rhaenyra. So that might tell us something about how they voted in 101. They may have sided with Rhaenyra, or rather with Laenor, but we don't know. But Otto's worry does imply something there. Now, during the dance, the royal fleet actually stopped over at Tarth on the way to the Stepstones before all that business happened. So it's just another example of Tarth being a valuable stopping point on the way to important campaign destinations. And Lord Bryndamere, when they did that, later, Lord Bryndamere boosted the fleet. He added 12 longships to the royal fleet that was sent to deal with Ricalio Rundoon after the dance. And it was Lord Brindamere who reported to the other leaders at Tarth that Ricalio had allied with Tyrosh and Bravo. So it was his whisperers or his informants that brought that information, which tells us a little bit about how maybe the Evenstars operate in the Free Cities. They need to know what's going on because of their proximity and because of history tells them that things like this can happen. Now, two of the greatest storms in living memory were, unsurprisingly, in the Stormlands. 166 and 221 are two of the biggest storms ever recorded, according to the World of Ice and Fire. Those very likely caused a lot of harm to Tarth, even though Tarth is maybe a little bit more protected because of its geography. Still, these were such huge storms that it's unlikely they escaped without some damage. As an aside, that these two storms were during the reigns of Baelor the Blessed and Aerys the First, respectively. Baelor the Blessed must have had an opinion on a storm like this. It's something to do with, the gods, whatever. Aerys the First probably just went right back to his books. He's like, it's raining. All right, I'm going to go read again. Now, working our way into the Hedge Knight Duncan Egg era, there was a Sir Quentin Tarth present at Ashford Meadow in 209. My little prediction is that we're going to see that on TV. A good way to draw attention to this connection that we're about to get to. Sir Duncan and the Tartharyens. Yes, I mashed Targaryen and Targaryen together. I'm allowed to do that. Here's a quote.
The Sapphire Isle, as some call it, is ruled by House Tarth of Evenfall Hall, an old family of Andal descent that boasts of ties to the Durrandons, the Baratheons, and more recently, to House Targaryen. Once kings in their own right, the Lords of Tarth still style themselves the Evenstar, a title that they claim goes back unto the dawn of days.
Notice how this says Andal descent. It doesn't even mention the First Man descent, but then it turns around and says that the Evenstar title goes back to well beyond the Andals. So, yeah, it's it kind of implies here, the way I interpret that, is that the Andal intermingling was really, really overwhelming on Tarth. So Nina says, and I agree, this is a theory that's been around for a while. Let's go through the particulars of Brienne and Duncan the Tall. So it starts with Brienne's paternal great-grandfather. That would be the son of Daella and Duncan. Now, Daella Targaryen did marry into Tarth. And we know...
Excuse you.
What?
Daella.
Daella!
You gotta say it once.
Daella, like paella. Yes, that is our running joke, isn't it? Yes, she is a mishmash of food types.
Proceed.
Thank you. So Dunk's shield was at Tarth. We know that. Brienne remembers it, right? She remembers seeing it when she was a kid. She doesn't know exactly what the deal was, but we certainly do. Now, they didn't hide it or destroy it, so it wasn't shameful. They would have gotten rid of it if it was some big scandal. They wouldn't have just left it sitting there. So whatever Dunk's involvement with House Tarth was, and there must have been something, it doesn't seem to have been overly scandalous. Or if it was scandalous, it was not so scandalous that it caused a big problem. Like, hey, it's not a bad thing necessarily to have a connection to Sir Duncan the Tall, even if he, broke his oaths or something like that to father a child. Yeah, this is something that's not fully fleshed out, although maybe it is in George's mind. So if the story was just well known, then what's the point of hiding the shield? Like, everybody knows Duncan the Tall went there and everybody's aware of the story. What's the point of the shield? Yeah, everybody knows already. You're hiding something that's already exposed. And Brienne finds the Lothston shield at Harrenhal. Now, that's a shield that has far more reason to have been disposed of than Dunk's shield, because Dunk's not a villain, whereas the Lostons were a fairly villainous, sinister house that had a sinister, villainous ending. So, yeah. But also, maybe the story just didn't get out. Maybe the story is under wraps. Maybe, Duncan may have slept with the Lady of Tarth, and that was kept under wraps. I mean, Brienne doesn't know, right? Doesn't seem to be aware of Sir Duncan the Tall being her ancestor. If she is, she hasn't thought about it yet. And it seems odd because she would recognize the shield. If she knows the story of Sir Duncan the Tall, that shield wouldn't be just some childhood memory. It would be something she has more information on. So that's telling. I don't think she knows who Sir Duncan the Tall is, she knows who he is. She doesn't know the connection to her own house. We know that the Targaryens and Tarths intermarried relatively recently. That's a fact. And the only real unknowns in terms of Targaryen marriages on the family tree are Egg's sisters. There's really no other fit here. So one very easy explanation, as Nina puts it, is Dunk would have gone to Tarth the same reason we see Aerys Oakheart go to Dorne, or Dunk escorting Aemon to the docks, which is a shorter distance, but Duncan escorting someone that's having a send-off, it happens a few times. So the famous Kingsguard knight escorting the Targaryen princess to marry into House Tarth, that is a thing that's very easy to imagine. So after Egg's marriage to Betha, what may have happened is Maekar decided to separate Dunk and Egg and sent Dunk to Tarth to set up this new marriage in place of what was probably originally going to be Egg marrying Daella himself. It was probably that was probably going to be the deal. Egg was probably going to marry his sister, but that got thrown out the window when he fell for Betha and Maekar, and others were like, fine. He's not going to inherit anyway. We'll let it go. We'll let it slide. Oops. So it's very plausible, all this. The separation of Dunk being sent there, the separation is part of it. And then so on the way, while he's escorting her, they get to talking. Daella notices how big and handsome and chivalrous he is, and Dunk notices how spicy and tasty Daella is. And they hook up, and she gets pregnant, and they pass the child off as a Tarth. No one ever reveals, and maybe Dunk doesn't even know. Maybe it's just kind of an unknown. He's like, I wonder, could that be my child? I don't know. So yeah, they would do that. They would pass the child off as a true-born Tarth, especially if the Lord Tarth at the time wasn't aware, which he probably wasn't. So yeah, a Tarth being fit to marry a Targaryen is kind of interesting, and there's a few reasons why it might have happened. One might be their connection to House Baratheon. By itself, that's probably not enough, and maybe not even terribly relevant, but it definitely, I think it matters. If you're having a marriage to the royal family and you have Baratheon ties or Baratheon blood, well, that just puts you even closer to House Targaryen, because the Baratheons are related to the Targaryens, especially in that connection is closer the farther back we go, until it was kind of restored here. Now, we don't know which Baratheons married House Tarth. It is absolutely specified that happened. It may be multiple examples, but we don't actually have the specifics. We don't have to have an explanation here. The Tarths could just be noble enough, highly ranked enough, well regarded enough for this to be sufficient. Another reason is Maekar very concerned with the Blackfires. What do we say? The Blackfires are so close by. The Golden Company lands in Tarth. Well, if you're worried about Tarth staying loyal, this is a great way to keep them in the fold. Keep Mary into House Targaryen. So there's a political reason here. This is still when the Blackfires were very active, and bringing House Tarth into the fold, or keeping House Tarth in the fold, makes a lot of sense as a strategy, as a marriage strategy. And again, there's a lot of other potential connections that are just missing from us here. And Dunk really fits nicely with the heraldry. Like, he has his shooting star, and their heraldry is Moon and Star, and then the Evenstar, right? So there you go. Or Moon and Sun, and the Evenstar, rather. And Brienne she fits the definition of a knight errant pretty well, which is kind of an Arthurian thing. And the term knight errant came along much later than Arthurian legends, like way later, but it very much applies, the concept. Knight errant is someone who tends to go wandering and seeks out quests. They often serve a noble lady, and they often are trying to rescue women, which Brienne is doing. But Duncan did as well. Now, Brienne isn't wandering in search of a quest. She's wandering as part of her quest because she doesn't know where Sansa and Arya are, and she doesn't have a lot of leads to follow. Where Dunk actually, along with Egg, actually wander. They're just like, well, we'll go off and wander, and we'll just see what happens wherever we end up. That's like the truest form of knight errantry, I think. Their only purpose is to stay alive and be good, which is, hey, you got to respect that. Now, sticking with Arthurian connections here briefly, Nina suggests the Dunk-Daella romance may be an homage or partly inspired or at least a parallel to the story of Tristan and Isolde. Tristan was the nephew of King Mark of Cornwall, and he accompanied/escorted Isolde, the princess of Ireland, to marry his uncle. And on the journey, under a love potion, they fall for each other. Now, the love potion part is funny and has a connection too, because remember, Egg talks about how his sister Daella cooked up a spicy concoction to make him fall in love with her. Here we have a love potion story again. So Tristan and Isolde, because of the potion, hook up, and they get caught up in a tragic conflict, love, duty, all that business. Isolde goes through with the marriage to Mark, but she loves Tristan. Tristan loves Isolde, but he honors his uncle. He doesn't hate them. King Mark isn't some bad guy in the story, and he loves them both. So yeah, it's real complicated, real dangerous, real iffy. But you can see the compare. If the theory about Daella and Dunk is accurate, and I definitely think it is, then this is absolutely a parallel. A Song of Ice and Fire and Tarth. Now we're in the current timeline. It is mentioned House Tarth in the prologue to Clash of Kings, as we said way back at the beginning here, or early in the episode. Crescent was asking Davos, how did your mission go? You went to try to meet with other Stormlords to win support for Stannis. How did it go? His report is grim. Few people would even meet with him. Most just refused to meet with him at all. Lord Selwyn was one of the very few who actually deigned to meet with him at a grove at midnight to decline. So he went out of his way, took a risk to say no. That is the behavior of a noble person. That's an honorable thing to do. He didn't just ignore Davos. He didn't ignore his duty to Stannis, but he also wasn't just going to go against the entirety of the Stormlands who were following Renly. He's like, yeah, sorry, I want to give you the respect of meeting with you, even though it's a grove at midnight, because I don't want anyone to find out about this, but I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk to tell you to your face what's going on. So I think that definitely implies a little bit of something positive about Lord Selwyn. And if you read between the lines throughout the novels, Lord Selwyn always seems to be well regarded. There's no one speaking ill of him at any point, right? So that is telling as well. And the ransom he offers for Brienne, we're told, is fair, right? Of course, Vargo expected Sapphire, but what he got was a fever. So Selwyn isn't actually, being cheap when he offers 300 gold dragons for a night. That's apparently a very standard, even if a little bit higher. Everything we know of seems to point him as a good guy. Now, Sir Andrew Tarth is the one who we talked about way at the beginning. He replaced Sir Alistair Thorne as the Master at Arms. He's not the Master at Arms anymore because he was killed at the Bridge of Skulls, where the Free Folk were led by the Weeper with his scythe and his runny eyes. So that's when Jon takes over as Master at Arms until he kind of hands it off to Iron Emmett, and then, everything's a mess now. It's all chaos. So who knows what Night's Watch officers have what jobs at the moment. Also, Andrew Tarth faced Sean many times at Ice and Fire Con, you wrote here. Yeah, there's a regular at Ice and Fire Con, a friend of ours, acquaintance, who went by that name as well. And they had little melees at Ice and Fire Con where people would fight with foam swords. And yes, Sean and Andrew definitely crossed swords a few times.
Also, in the Faceless Man game, they were real mortal enemies because they fought each other
Oh,
in
really?
the tourney and in the Faceless Man game. Andrew killed him. I'd say Andrew got the best of Sean most times, I think.
Okay. Sorry, Sean. Now, Brienne. Obviously, this is not going to be a comprehensive breakdown of Brienne and her life. That's at least a 2-episode thing. We did 2 episodes on Baelor Breakspear, 3 on Baelor the Blessed. So Brienne, yeah, there's way more to say about her. In addition to her brother Galadon, who died, very young, he drowned, which, by the way, that's an ending that is unfortunately more likely in a culture that does a lot of sailing and swimming than in, say, someone who lives in the Vale, But she also had 2 sisters, an Arianne and an Alysanne. They both died in the cradle as well. The name Alysanne, of course, is another note of goodness. You're just naming the person who was perhaps the best queen of all time. You invoke that name, and it just makes you think positively. I'd like to explore Brienne in terms of how she relates to Tarth, how she expresses the vibe of House Tarth, and how the island itself represents a lot of what she's become or what she is. Here is a quote.
Sir Colin, Catelyn said to her escort, "Who is this man, and why do they mislike him so?" Sir Colin frowned.
"Because he is no man, my lady. That's Brienne of Tarth, daughter to Lord Selwyn the Evenstar."
"Daughter?" Catelyn was horrified.
Horrified? I brought this up earlier, but what the heck, Kat? It's not that telling about her, though. It's really just about the way she was raised. The idea is so foreign to her. She's like, what? It goes against everything she was raised, everything she was taught. It's a very patriarchal culture, also, obviously, that does not permit women to fight for the most part. And not only is she doing it, she's doing it really, really well. So she's not the only one, Catelyn, who's like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is something I've been told all my life isn't even possible. Yet here it is happening before my very eyes. So it is just a function of what they've been taught and taught over and over and ingrained. And it's been that way for centuries. So the other side of that is the influence of Tarth. Tarth as a island culture, a little separate from everything else, a little more insular, a little more closed off. There'd be less corruption of the value systems, more idealism, more the knightly virtues seen as they were intended rather than a corrupted version that's been played out on the mainland for so long, compromised by politics and intrigue and other considerations. There's just less of that in the closed off world of Tarth. So that really supports Brienne being someone who is so into these values, but also a little naive to the way the rest of the world works. Because she is, while she sticks to these values, even as she discovers the rest of the world isn't like that, she didn't know the world was like that. She arrives in Westeros mainland not having learned these things. Even though she knows that women aren't knights, that she knows well. She knows that she's an exception, a major exception. Her master at arms that trained her pointed this out. He taught her to fight in ways that are geared to who she is. He taught her to fight with discipline and to play the long game. He said, look, men are going to want to beat you quickly because otherwise they will feel that their pride has been touched in a negative way because you're not supposed to be sorely tested by a woman at combat. Ooh, that's unthinkable. If you don't beat that woman quickly, then it says something bad about you. Well, we know that's not true because Brienne's an amazing swords person. So that's a incorrect line of thinking, but it's a very ingrained line of thinking. So Brienne has that advantage, and we see her do that to Jaime. Just straight up, that's the strategy she uses against him, and it works perfectly. So Tarth sets a lot of this up. She is raised in a place where their most important legend is the perfect knight. She becomes that without the awareness of how that's not really a thing anywhere else. She might have believed that there's other people in the world that are just as dedicated to these ideals as she is. She probably didn't realize how unique she was in that regard. The only thing she thought she was unique in, it was being a woman with these abilities. It wasn't her values that she expected to have these differences with people. That was as much as a surprise as anything, if not the bigger surprise. She was expecting more noble behavior. She was caught off guard by the cruel prank. She didn't see it coming. She was too naive to even suspect it. But a woman who lived amongst those people all her life would have seen it coming. She'd be wary. She would have experience with these kinds of things. She would have seen them done to other people, if not herself. So this is something that someone on the mainland would have learned at a younger age, even though Brienne isn't exactly old. These aren't things that you learn later in life. These are things you learn as a kid. That's when picking on and teasing, that stuff happens early. And Brienne certainly had some of that, but not this kind, right? We know she got teased and poked fun at and all that, but it sounds like it was not as bad on Tarth. Like they didn't do that as much, partly out of respect for her house in part, but also because they probably just aren't like that as much. They aren't as vicious. They aren't as cruel in their mockery of these things. Because it's important to be a true knight, a perfect knight. And since Brienne has a lot of these qualities, well, that's not something to mock. Despite so many trope inversions, like Brienne is perhaps the best example of trope inversions in the single character in a world that's full of trope inversions. But the trope inversions are not about the perfect knighthood. The inversion is that she is the perfect knight without being a knight. It's not that her beliefs are inverted or anything like that, especially the Arthurian influence. These things are very much in line with that. The things that are inverted are parts about her, like specifically what her skill set, how people react to her, their expectations being both reader and in-world people being inverted and having a lot of surprises there. So Jaime coming back to him, he's the only person he ever told about Aerys is Brienne. He didn't tell Cersei. He didn't tell Tyrion. And that's because of this purity, because he actually wants to be respected by her, because again, she's what he wanted to be. He won't admit it to himself, but it's there. He wanted to be Arthur Dayne, and she is upholding that standard, if not more so. So that's why he told her, of all the people he revealed this to, it was her, because he cares. He cares that she looks down on him. Her opinion matters because she's the ideal. She's what he wanted to be. So her opinion matters. He can't get around that. As much as he wants to as when she wants to mock it, he can't get around it. It's what he always wanted to be. She is that. He has to face that. And he slowly does over the course of his arc, even while she's gone. A phrase that is applied to Jon Snow would really fit to Brienne in a lot of things. Like you could say, you know nothing, Brienne of Tarth, because she is naive and she's had to learn a lot of these things. And she's less naive than she was. And she knows a lot of things that other people don't. She's smarter in other ways too, but she's pretty naive about how bad and cruel and evil men could be until she learned that firsthand. It would be having Jaime, if Jaime had said that to her, it would have been fitting. You know nothing, Brienne. She says similar things like, are you thick as a castle wall? Which of course is a nod to her ancestry with Sir Duncan. But Ygritte was a much more worldly person than Jon. That's why she could say that to him, because she's got a lot better idea how the world works, even though she's on the wrong side of the wall from where Jon learned everything. Because Jon was raised in a castle. He was raised in a bit of a bubble, even though he's a bastard, even though there's all these other things. Yeah, he doesn't know how common folk live. He doesn't know all these other things. He especially doesn't know how common free folk live. So, and Brienne is the same. She's learning these things as her arc goes through. You may have noticed, partly because I pointed it out a few different times, that there's just no bad stories about Tarth. Where's the villainy? Where's the dishonor? We don't have those tales. There surely got to be some, because George just doesn't write things in that black and white, but he definitely made this as light gray as he could. This is maybe like House Blackwood without the counterpart house that's, the Brackens who were written often as villains. There's no, anti-Tarth here.
There's no Darth Tarth?
Darth Tarth. Yeah. So there's just things that make them look good and things that are neutral and no things that make them look bad. But beyond Brienne and the other quality humans of Tarth, it has enough unique qualities to be rich for storytelling as things that haven't happened yet. Certainly George seems to have planned for a Dunk and Egg story to take place there, in the long run, which means he already may have some ideas for, what Tarth is going to be like, or some of the characters that would be in that story. Maybe some Tarth commoners, or maybe some other Tarth lordlings, see what that's like. Maybe just to show the difference between the mainlanders and them. Fun stuff like that. Local history, things we wouldn't get anywhere else. Just further examples from existing influences. Some of it would be probably Arthurian and Tolkien-esque. But the best way we might learn more is through Brienne's memories. She's experienced Tarth for 18 years as her only place that she's, the one place she lived. She hasn't thought about it a whole lot, but she has thought about it going back and how she would, if she wasn't in this oath, she would go home. And well, what happens when she learns that the Golden Company has taken Tarth? Her family is held hostage. Does that change her mind about anything? It's kind of ironic that the person she's serving is Catelyn, whose house is family, duty, honor, family first. I don't know if Brienne will see it that way, but that's something to consider. Brienne may say her oath comes first, but she has an oath to her family too, doesn't she? Maybe not something she just stated outwardly like that, but it's certainly implied. I mean, it's Westeros, and I don't think Brienne needs to be told that. I don't know that her arc is going to take her to the Tarth to fight the Golden Company, but I do think it will cause some conflict and make her think about it. She's like, well, am I really gonna find Sansa or Arya? Should I really keep doing this when my family's threatened? Like, I know that's happening. I may not be able to ever find Sansa or Arya. They may not even be alive. So shouldn't I maybe go do this? And that would be a reason for her to think about Tarth, the things that she would go there, the things that she would be saving, the things she would be preserving, the people she would be protecting. More about her father, at the very least. So that it would be a good way to add even more conflict to her story. Not that she doesn't have enough, not that she's not in a really bad spot right now. But I think the Sapphire Isle will play a more prominent role in her thoughts going forward, if not only because she just hasn't thought about it very much yet, but because there's good reasons to, because it's threatened right now. There's things happening there that she would want to think about. It makes sense. And of course, with her if she ever learns anything about Dunk and Egg, or if Dunk and Egg, the story or even the TV shows, have reasons to bring up Tarth, to maybe highlight or give nods to the ancestral connection, or just, and through that we may get more about the island, the people, the noble house, past, present, and future. Trivia answer: which Targaryen prince was killed on Tarth? Prince Aemon. The Prince Aemon who was heir to the throne. Princess Daea certainly died there as well, most likely, but probably natural causes. I said killed, very specifically, because, yeah, she probably lived her whole life there and died, but she probably wasn't killed. And she also wasn't a prince. She's a princess. But still, worth mentioning. Poll results. Y'all had a pretty strong opinion here. Will Brienne inherit Evenfall Hall? Will she join a Kingsguard, or join a Kingsguard, not the Kingsguard, but, the or a Kingsguard? Will she die, or will it be some other? Only 7% said other, 13% said die, 17% said inherit, and 63% say Kingsguard, or something like a Kingsguard, or some sort of order that you don't inherit things when you're in it. If she doesn't inherit, by the way, that would mean some cousin or uncle would inherit. That seems like there's probably someone like that out there. I mean, it's probably not a tiny family. If it was, that would be something else for her to think about. Like, well, I need to go home because there's no one else to inherit the house. Like, I'm the one left. That probably would have come up by now. But hey, George could pivot that direction and hear, hey, my uncle and my cousins were killed by the Golden Company. I'm like, who else would inherit now? Something like that. I mentioned quite a few episodes in this one, or at least hinted at them. I didn't necessarily call them by name, but let's do so now. We have a series called Under the Dragons, where there's a variety of houses we look at and what their life was like, what their history was like after the House Targaryen took over. We have a full set of episodes on the Hedge Knight, the Sworn Sword, and the Mystery Knight, which of course has some talk of Brienne here and there, and certainly, obviously, is very focused on Sir Duncan. We have an episode on the Golden Company as part of our Blackfire series. We certainly talked about the Golden Company a bit today, and we certainly are curious how that's going to play out because the Golden Company, well, they're on Tarth right now. And that whole, they're all wrapped up in the whole young Griff, Aegon the Sixth plot line. Who knows how that'll go? At least John Connington's not there, so they probably won't have a grayscale epidemic on Tarth. That may be one thing that they don't have to worry about as much. That's another nice thing about island life is the diseases don't necessarily spread. It's easier to maybe cut yourself off from the rest of the world and avoid such things. Also, we have our episodes on Baelor the Blessed, and we have an episode on the death of Maekar. That's an important one for given things we talked about in terms of the timeline of Dunk and House Tarth that would have happened during Maekar's reign. And then we have Fire and Blood, our series on Fire and Blood, which has a lot about Jaehaerys the First, who we talked about a bit in this episode, and about the Conquest, where there were those marriages and things like that, and the invasion of Dorne by the Stormlands. Lots of options for you, folks. This is our first episode recorded in 2026. We are very excited for the year and very excited for you all to go through it with us. It should be a noteworthy year, more so than most others. Maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be an even better reason to celebrate 2026 in terms of A Song of Ice and Fire, but I'm not going to jinx it by saying what I mean. You know what I mean. Thanks to Nina for her great takes, and make sure to check out goodqueenalley.tumblr.com. Thanks to Joey Townsend for our music. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our video intro and for the maps you see behind me. Get them at klaradox.de. That's claradox.de. On behalf of Ashea, I'm Aziz. We'll see you next time. You know what to do. In the meantime, Valar, reread us.